She opened her diner for stranded truckers, and then something unbelievable happened. Hi there, and welcome to our channel. If you enjoyed this story, we'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let us know where in the world you're watching from. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss tomorrow's special story. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Every day brings a new journey, and we can't wait to have you along for the ride. See? You in the next one? Carla Benson wiped down the last counter of the night, her hands moving more from habit than hope. The old neon sign above the window blinked weakly, casting a tired blue light across the nearly empty diner. Only 15 minutes remained until she could officially flip the sign to closed and retreat upstairs to her small, drafty apartment. Outside, the blizzard raged, the wind howling against the walls like a living thing, and the temperature had already dropped to a bitter 5 degrees Celsius. Business had been slow for months, but tonight, it was completely dead. Carla couldn't blame anyone. Only a fool would be out in a storm like this. Her heart ached as she glanced at the register, $24.13 for the entire day. Not even enough to cover the heating bill, let alone chip away at the mortgage payments. She was already 3 months behind on. She sighed, reaching for the sign to flip it when the door banged open with a sudden gust of freezing air. A man stepped in, stomping the snow from his boots, his trucker cap pulled low over his weathered face. He looked around, his eyes landing on Carla behind the counter. "Evening, ma'am," he said, his voice rough from years of diesel fumes and cold air. "Any chance you're still serving?" Carla hesitated, glancing at the clock, 6:48 p.m. Technically, they were still open for another 12 minutes. Technically. She set the sign back down and gave him a tired smile. "Kitchen's open for a few more minutes," she said. "Coffee's fresh. What can I get you?" "Coffee, black, and anything hot you've got left," the man replied, sliding onto a stool with a sigh of relief. "Name's Rick Owens. Highway's shut. Doing about 10 miles back, total whiteout." Carla's heart dropped, shut down. That meant no one was going anywhere tonight. As if confirming the news, the door chimed again, and 2 more men stumbled in, brushing snow from their jackets. Then another 2, and another. Within 15 minutes, there were 14 truckers filling the booths and stools, their jackets steaming as they thawed. Carla and Maddie, her 24-year-old waitress, scrambled to serve them what little they had left, bowls of canned soup, reheated stew, and endless refills of hot coffee. As Carla ladled out the last of her supplies, she looked out the frosted windows at the rows of trucks barely visible through the blizzard. The temperature was still dropping, and the forecast called for another foot of snow overnight. Sleeping in their rigs could mean hypothermia, or worse. Without thinking, she spoke. "You boys can't stay out there. It's too cold. We've got a couple of couches upstairs, a few spare blankets. It's not much, but it's warm." Rick looked at her, surprised. "You'd really do that for a bunch of strangers?" Carla smiled faintly, thinking of Jack, her late husband. "My husband always said truckers look out for each other. He would have never turned anyone away." The men nodded, grateful and humbled. That night, as the blizzard raged outside, Carla Benson kept her diner open, not for profit, but for kindness, and unknowingly lit a spark that would change everything. The storm showed no mercy that night, while the wind screamed outside and the old diner windows rattled in their frames. Carla kept the coffee flowing and the hot plates coming, doing everything she could to keep the truckers warm and fed. Every hour or so, someone would check the radio or the weather updates on their phones, but the news was always the same. Roads still closed, plows stuck, nothing moving until morning at the earliest. By midnight, Carla and Maddie had exhausted every scrap of food they could find. They were down to crackers, packets of instant oatmeal, and whatever candy bars hadn't sold from the display by the register. Carla even raided her own apartment upstairs, dragging down 2 boxes of canned goods she had stockpiled for emergencies. If this wasn't an emergency, she didn't know what was. As she handed out bowls of lukewarm oatmeal, she heard Rick chuckle lowly. "You know," he said, leaning back in his chair, This place reminds me of a little diner up in Iowa. Was owned by a fella named Jack. Jack Benson, I think. Saved my hide more than once. Carla nearly dropped the bowl she was carrying. Her heart jumped into her throat. You knew Jack Benson? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Rick looked at her, surprised. Yeah, good man. Helped me fix a busted radiator once in the middle of a snowstorm, way back in '96. Wouldn't take a dime. Just said, truckers stick together. Why? You know him? Carla swallowed hard, forcing a smile past the sudden lump in her throat. He was my husband, she said quietly. The room fell silent. Forks hovered mid-air. Coffee mugs froze halfway to mouths. One by one, the truckers turned to look at her, their faces softening with something deeper than gratitude. Recognition. Another man, an older driver with a gray beard and kind eyes, spoke up. Jack Benson? Used to run CB Channel 19 during bad storms? Guided folks through the mountain passes? That's him, Carla said, blinking fast against the sting in her eyes. Stories began to spill out across the diner like a flood. How Jack had helped a rookie navigate icy roads in Colorado. How he'd delivered supplies during a flood in Kansas when nobody else could get through. How his voice over the CB radio had kept lonely drivers company on endless midnight runs. Carla listened, tears slipping down her cheeks unnoticed. She had known Jack was a good man, but she hadn't realized the reach of his kindness, the countless lives he'd touched without ever seeking thanks or recognition. Rick raised his coffee cup in a silent toast. Around the room, others followed, lifting their mugs high. To Jack Benson, Rick said, his voice thick with emotion. To Jack, the others echoed. Carla wiped her eyes and smiled through the ache. In that small, battered diner, on a night when the world outside had turned white and wild, Jack Benson's spirit came roaring back to life. And so did hope. Morning came slow and heavy, like a man waking from a deep, troubled sleep. The blizzard had finally spent its fury, leaving behind towering drifts of snow, some piled nearly 6 feet high against the side of the diner. Carla stood by the frosted window, cradling a cup of black coffee in her hands, staring at the deserted highway beyond. For a moment, it almost felt like the whole world had been erased overnight, covered in cold white silence. The truckers, stiff from a night spent on battered couches and makeshift beds, began gathering their things. There was a quiet sadness in the air, the kind that settled when people knew they had to leave but didn't really want to. Rick clapped her gently on the shoulder. Wish we could do more, Carla, he said, his voice low. You've already done more than enough, she replied, smiling through the exhaustion. They tried to pay, pulling out worn wallets stuffed with crumpled bills, but Carla waved them off. Your company was payment enough, she said firmly. Besides, Jack wouldn't have it any other way. Reluctantly, they trickled out into the cold one by one, climbing into their trucks and rumbling off down the newly cleared road. By noon, the diner was empty again, emptier somehow than before. Maddie helped Carla clean up, scrubbing down tables and stacking chairs, the two of them working in silence. They didn't need to speak. The truth hung heavy in the air. They had nothing left to serve, no food, no supplies, and barely enough heat to keep the pipes from freezing. The final notice from the bank sat under the cash register, a cruel reminder that good intentions couldn't pay the mortgage. By evening, Carla packed a few of Jack's things into boxes, his old CB radio, his battered trucking cap, a few photos, yellowed with time. Each item felt like a small funeral in her hands, a little goodbye she wasn't ready to say. As she taped up the last box, a sound drifted through the empty diner, the low, unmistakable hiss of air brakes. She froze. Then came the rumble of diesel engines. Headlights cut through the twilight, one after another, until the parking lot lit up like a small city. Carla rushed to the window, heart pounding. She counted the trucks, 10, 20, more still rolling in, forming a line that stretched down the narrow county road. Rick's rig was the first to park. He climbed out, grinning wide beneath his cap, and waved for her to come outside. Carla threw on her coat and boots and pushed through the diner doors into the cold. What is this? she called over the noise, her voice shaking. Rick approached, handing her a thick, weathered envelope. "We made some calls," he said simply. "Truckers forums, CB chatter, word of mouth. Turns out Jack helped a lot of people over the years. Folks figured it was time to return the favor." Carla's fingers trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside was cash, more than she could even count at a glance. Enough maybe to save everything. For the first time in months, hope didn't feel like a memory. It felt real. It felt alive. The days that followed moved faster than Carla could have ever imagined. One moment she was standing in the snow, clutching that envelope with tears freezing on her cheeks. The next, her quiet, forgotten diner was buzzing like a beehive. Rick wasn't kidding when he said the word had spread. Truckers from across 6 states had picked up the story, passing it along CB channels and online forums. Donations flooded in, not just in cash but in supplies, canned goods, fresh produce, coffee by the gallon, even kitchen equipment that was better than anything Carla had ever dreamed of affording. The parking lot, once big enough for maybe a dozen cars, now overflowed with semis. Rick helped organize a crew of drivers and locals to clear and expand the lot, laying down fresh gravel to keep it from turning into a muddy mess when the snow melted. Maddie's younger brother, a part-time construction worker, rallied his buddies to build a small lounge with hot showers and a washer and dryer, amenities no truck stop in the area offered. Carla watched it all happen like she was dreaming. Jack and Carla's highway haven, because that's what they decided to call it, became more than a diner. It became a destination, a lifeline, a legend whispered among truckers from Texas to South Dakota. "If you're driving Route 18, you gotta stop at the Haven," they said. "They'll treat you like family there." And they did. Carla refused to change. The basics. The coffee stayed strong and bottomless. The chicken fried steak stayed the best between Chicago and Denver. And every new driver who came through the door was greeted like an old friend, whether they were seasoned veterans or wide-eyed rookies on their first long haul. Some days, Carla still had to blink back tears when she stood behind the counter, watching the booths fill up, hearing the low rumble of laughter and road stories echoing off the walls. The old CB radio Jack loved so much stayed right where it had always been, mounted above the counter. Rick and a few of the other regulars taught Carla how to work it. She started sending out weather updates, traffic reports, and sometimes just a simple, steady voice saying, "You're not alone out there." The bank, once breathing down her neck, was now a distant memory. The mortgage was paid off within 2 months. Business contracts with regional trucking companies ensured steady traffic, and Carla was able to hire new staff, local kids, retired drivers looking to stay connected to the road, even Maddie's cousin who baked the kind of pies that could make a grown man cry. Every night, as Carla locked up the diner, she paused to touch the photograph that hung behind the register. A picture of Jack, grinning wide, standing proudly beside his first rig. "I hope you're seeing this, old man," she'd whisper with a smile. The highway had moved. The world had changed. But Jack's spirit, and the diner they built together, had never been more alive. 1 year later, Jack and Carla's highway haven didn't just survive, it thrived. The little diner that had once sat forgotten by the side of the road was now a landmark for truckers crisscrossing the Midwest. Drivers planned their routes around it. Companies scheduled fuel stops nearby just to give their crews a break, within its welcoming walls. Carla stood at the front window one cool April morning, sipping her coffee and watching as a new convoy pulled into the expanded parking lot. Still couldn't believe how far they had come. The lounge was bustling every day now. The kitchen ran almost nonstop, and she had a full team of staff, including Maddie, who had stepped up as assistant manager, and 2 new cooks who somehow managed to replicate Jack's famous recipes like they were sacred rites. But it wasn't just the food that brought people in. It was the feeling. Truckers who had once been strangers now called each other by name. Stories were swapped over hot plates and stronger coffee. Newbies were mentored by veterans who sat them down at the counter and told them the unwritten rules of the road. And every night, before closing time, Carla would power up the old CB radio, the one Jack had used all those years ago. She'd broadcast a simple message. "Highway's clear tonight, folks. Coffee's hot if you need it. Drive safe and remember, you're never alone out here." The tradition became a ritual, one that connected drivers across miles of empty road and frozen fields. Some nights, Carla would hear a dozen different truckers check in, telling her where they were, how the weather looked, or just passing on a joke to lighten the miles. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, Carla decided it was time to add something special. She pulled out a new framed photograph, a picture taken on the anniversary of the night everything changed. It showed Carla standing outside the diner, surrounded by dozens of truckers, all smiling wide despite the cold. Above the photo, a small wooden plaque read, "Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the ones who show up when the road gets rough." She hung it right beside Jack's old picture. As she stepped back to admire it, a young man entered the diner, shaking snow from his jacket. He looked barely 20, eyes wide with a mix of nerves and excitement. "First time here?" Carla asked, her voice warm. "Yes, ma'am," he said, sliding onto a stool. "Folks say you have the best coffee and the best advice on this side of the Rockies." Carla laughed softly, pouring him a cup. "Well, we do our best. First-timers. Get coffee on the house. What's your story, kid?" As he began to talk, Carla smiled to herself. Jack's legacy wasn't frozen in the past. It was alive and growing, passed from one set of calloused hands to the next, rolling down the highways. In the hearts of those who remembered, the world had changed. But here, inside these old diner walls, some things, kindness, loyalty, family, were still as strong as steel. If this story touched your heart even a little, we'd love to hear from you. Take a moment to drop a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from, or share a memory of a time when a stranger's kindness made a difference in your life. Have you ever found yourself stranded and someone stepped in to help? Or maybe you've been the one to offer a helping hand when it mattered most. Stories like these remind us that even in a fast-moving world, simple acts of generosity still ripple out farther than we know. We believe that every voice matters here, and every story shared adds another thread to the tapestry of hope and connection we're trying to build on this channel. So don't be shy. Your words could inspire someone else who's just looking for a reason to believe in goodness again. And if you enjoyed this journey with Carla and the truckers, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter of hope and resilience coming tomorrow. We can't wait to read your stories down in the comments. See you there.